What's up, my loves? So welcome back to my channel. My name is Jay, and guys, today I have got another book review for you, and today it's going to be another horror novel. It is Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. So if you've never been with me on a book review, just so you know, anything that is rated 3 stars and above is a good rating. I found the book enjoyable, and there are varying degrees of enjoyable from that 3-star and up rating. Anything below, naturally, is something that I didn't necessarily enjoy, and so I'll get into the reasons why. But first, this book is going to be a 5-star rating for me for a lot of surprising reasons, actually. If you have not heard of Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay, this book was so interesting. So the synopsis is basically that we follow the Barrett family, and they have 2 daughters. There is Marjorie, the eldest, and Mary, Meredith in full, but Mary for short, Mary the youngest. And Marjorie, the oldest, I think she's 14, she is having some issues, and it is up in the air whether she is possessed or just has schizophrenia. The family goes through sort of different channels of how to figure out this whole dilemma with their eldest daughter. They go through therapy, they just try many different things, medications, etc. And at some point they decide to bring in a priest and then a show crew. Eventually their journey through this harrowing tale is all recorded for primetime television, and that's how we get to their story. So for the most part, there are 3 sort of modes of storytelling in this book. We've got the, or rather not modes, perspectives. We've got the perspective of Mary when she's actually going through this as a young, I believe she's 8 years old. And then there's the perspective of Mary when she's much older. Much time has passed since this tragic moment in her family history, and she is retelling this history to a novelist who is going to be writing a biography of her life. And then the third and last perspective is the perspective of Karen, an internet blogger who is, I guess, renowned for her horror movie and show reviews. And so these perspectives are very interesting, and they sort of bring a really interesting dimension to this entire book. I'm gonna put this book down. I'm gonna put it right behind me so you can look at it. There you go, now you can look at it. So out of all those perspectives, I found the blogger voice very interesting. She brings sort of an analysis and a skepticism to the Barrett family possession show. And it is actually called, the show ends up being titled The Possession. And so she sort of breaks things down as if it was sort of like a Rotten Tomatoes sort of review. She talks about the political implications, the sort of sexist notions and underpinnings of what a young girl like Marjorie has to go through when she is either deemed possessed by a demon or schizophrenic. She also, Karen, she also talks about how the sort of there's the tragic breakdown of the nuclear family of the Barrett family. So we've got the mother, the father, and the 2 daughters. And before all of this sort of happens, it's very much that they are a normal family. And the biggest thing that sort of sets off this whole story is that their father has been out of work for a while. He has sort of failed at finding a new job. They're really pinching pennies, and he has turned to religion to sort of help him cope. And with that, things sort of kick off with Marjorie and her schizophrenia slash possession. I was about to say exorcism, but that follows through. I think that as you move through the book, the father and all of his like issues before the possession end up becoming more and more important. So if you haven't read this, keep that in mind when you start. So my thoughts on this book are a lot, if I'm being honest. I finished this book, and you can see my live reactions on my most recent vlog, but I finished this book and I had a lot of emotions because the ending was sort of explosive for me. I mean, I didn't think it was gonna end that way, and I think what's really interesting about Paul Tremblay's writing is that he sort of takes you through the story and gives you this sort of false sense of security. Throughout reading the book, you sort of juggle with the thought that either Marjorie is possessed or she's not. she's either faking it, or she's very mentally ill, or she is actually possessed. You have a lot of questions, you have a lot of turmoil as a reader. A lot of different sides are sort of presented to you in a very organic way. You have the parents that are very concerned and very distraught over the health of their daughter, and they don't really know who to believe. Either they try and believe their doctors and medical professionals, or the priest that eventually becomes very important in the father's life, or can they believe their daughter, which is a strange thing for them to question, but she's just so out of character that it really isn't something that they can fully immerse themselves in, her actual point of view, I mean. Another thing that I kind of wanted to touch on is that this book is very meta horror, in the sense that if you guys have ever seen the movie Scream, and you really appreciate that kind of movie where it's like comedy, but it's also making fun of itself, but it's also a commentary on the horror genre, I sort of think that Paul Tremblay's Head Full of Ghosts is very similar. I don't think that there's a whole lot of comedy in this book, but I do think that it sort of pokes holes in the sort of possession subgenre of horror, while also treating its own homage to it, if that makes any sense. I feel like Paul Tremblay, via this book, has a large respect for the possession slash exorcism subgenre of horror, but he also definitely finds it to be something that you can poke holes in, make fun of, and understand that there are some sort of problematic tropes of the subgenre, especially when it's aimed mostly, or rather the main protagonist in this subgenre is mostly young girls that are virginal, but over sexualized. But that's a whole other discussion, if I'm being honest. That's a much longer discussion. As someone who consumes a lot of horror in different medias like movies, shows, books, etc., I have a big appreciation for the meta horror subgenre. I'm getting like tongue-tied over these terms, but I have a large appreciation for meta horror, and this book is no exception, honestly. So another question that I sort of kept with me as I was reading this book is this book actually scary? Is it something that sort of induces dread and terror and creepiness in me? And I would say that on a scale of 1 to 10, it's probably like a 6 in terms of dread and horror. It's not that scary to me. I didn't find myself terrified waking up from nightmares like I've had with other books, but I will say that there is a deep feeling of being unsettled as I finished this book and closed it. It stayed with me for a couple of days. I really ruminated and sat on it, because just the unraveling of their family and their father just going deeper and deeper into his religion, and then the sort of destruction of the closeness of the sisters. I have a sister, and I feel like if my little sister was going through something like this, I'd be terrified and conflicted as well. And I will say the last 60 to 100 pages, shit pops off, guys. And the last big reveal of this story really was what unsettled me deeply. It left me with questions, and it was very open-ended, but it also was open-ended in a good way, where I couldn't help but need and want more, but also I was sort of satisfied with feeling like I wanted more from the story, because sometimes there are questions that just need to be left unanswered, and that is a big thing in horror. And I think that Paul Tremblay does it very effectively in Head Full of Ghosts. Honestly, guys, this book is a reflection of one of my favorite sort of modes of horror, where it's sort of slow burn in the beginning, and then the payoff is really large, really satisfying, and I think I really enjoyed this book. Honestly, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, but if you'd asked me in the middle, it would have been like a 3.5, because things were sort of slow. I wasn't necessarily sure if I was connecting with these characters, and part of me was like, what is this book trying to tell me? And when I got to the end, I understood the answers to those questions that I had so much more, but then I had so many more questions. Anyway, I'm rambling now. I really love this book, and I think I would recommend it to most anyone who's open to the horror genre, and even those who are not. It's not that scary, it's not that nightmare inducing, but it is deeply unsettling, and I think it just evoked all the right things in me, where I am anxiously awaiting my order for the next Paul Tremblay book because honestly, I'm into it. I'm into you, Paul Tremblay. Give me more. All right, guys, that's it for this book review. If you enjoyed this, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps my channel. Hit that notification bell, subscribe, so you always know when I've got good things coming to you. Bye, y'all.